Um, okay, fantastic. So let's kick off the session. So first, I am going to invite Osei Johnson, who is an activist, an artist, and a creator in Bristol in the southwest of England. He is an outspoken young man and is a loud voice in the community. So Osei, if you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself and the topic that you're going to speak about. Thanks.
Hey everyone, thank you, Jenny. Thank you for having me. So yeah, like Jenny said, I'm a creator, actor, activist in Bristol. I guess a little bit about how I got into being an activist is all down to Cleo Lake. I met her after doing a show, and I always had an interest for like politics and being spoken and an activist. And yeah, Cleo just sort of like allowed me to hone that desire and that skill to do this type of stuff. And we've sort of been working together for like a year now. And out of that, she sort of was tasked by the Global African People's Parliament and another organization, which I've forgotten the name of, to set up a youth council. So out of it's not quite a youth council as such yet, but out of that, we have formed this organization called the African Caribbean Assembly. And it is a collective of African Caribbean people from the diaspora living in the Southwest, particularly in Bristol, who have come together to build and develop for the future of African Caribbean people. But one of the main things that we have sort of started doing to begin with is have a hand in like activism. So our first official campaign has been to save the Rastafari Cultural Centre here in St. Paul's in Bristol, which has basically been repossessed by the council and is being sold, even though for the last 30-ish years, it has housed a crucial service to the local community, to Rastafarian people for their religious purposes, but also to the wider African Caribbean community as a consultation service or counseling or therapy of sorts, as well as housing a shop where it sells stuff that's made by local people. So it is quite like a cultural hub in the local area. So yeah, our task has been to try to stop the sale. So we stopped the sale. We've got a petition going. We have a meeting with Marvin Rees, the Bristol City Mayor, and another councillor, Asher Craig, soon. And hopefully we will be taking that forward to keep the building within the community. But outside of that, myself and a few other people are sort of trying to get formal wording and documents down for ACA, the organization, as well as also building networks and connecting with the community, because we are, at the end of the day, we are not just an organization who have come in to take over. We are the community and we want to be part of the community. So yeah, that's sort of what I've been doing and how I got into everything. But I guess for me, Black Lives Matter beyond the hashtag, it means actually like being active in the Black community and taking responsibility for building a better future for that community. And that can happen in many ways, whether it's through education, whether it's through employment, whether it's through the arts, or whether it is through activism. We sort of don't have, as of yet, any restrictions because we are really new. So we are just feeling our way through things, but also trying to get guidance from our elders. So yeah, it's been quite interesting so far to see how everything's sort of done behind the scenes, but also to see how we can interact with the wider community and we can spread this message of, one of our members said a really great quote, and I'm going to repeat it forever. his quote is to reimagine blackness. And I think that that's such a powerful thing in this day and age, considering like how many times on TV or in films that it's just the same old stereotypes of Black people. And I think it's not that it should fall on our shoulders, but we have the responsibility to reimagine what the world thinks of us and put that out there. So yeah, that's one of the most amazing things that I think I'm most excited about working towards in terms of beyond the hashtag.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for kicking us off there and introducing us, and also representing the youth voice within this conversation. I think you're right, it's so important to have that representation, to look at building back a better community. Not we're doing this so many times, whether it's from COVID, whether it's from racism, systemic racism, whether it's with the environment. So massively important. Also very interesting about the generation learning. I think you said the involvement with your elders, very fascinating. Okay, thank you so much for starting us off there with the presentations. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and make sure if anything pops up that I pose that to you during the Q&A at the end of the session. So thank you so much, Osei. So our next speaker is Greg Foxsmith. He is a criminal lawyer in London and co-founder of the Jack Leslie campaign. Greg, are you able to unmute yourself? And your 10 minutes starts now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I am a lawyer, so very hard to stick for 10 minutes. I'm bound to blur on, so make sure you mute me when I've exceeded my limit. I am in London, but I come from Devon, so I'm definitely of the southwest, born and bred. And my geographical journey really is from Devon to Islington, not only geographically, but probably politically, because I saw Islington was trending today. And when I wondered what we'd done now, I realised we're being attacked in Islington for being Remainer. Well, yes, Remainer and proud, so very much Islington. I've also got a football story, which is where Jack Leslie comes in, because Jack Leslie was a footballer, one of the greatest footballers that you've never heard of. And you can see that I'm wearing a green top because I grew up in Plymouth, and the team in Plymouth is Plymouth Argyle, who are the only team in the English League to play in green. So my politics, like my football, is green. It's Green Army and it's Green Party for me. But when I started going to Plymouth Argyle in the 80s, I saw Plymouth wasn't a very diverse city when I grew up, and I encountered or witnessed racism on the terraces towards Black footballers, whether they played for rival teams or even if they played for Plymouth Argyle. And as is often the way, those racist chants and taunts were from a minority in the crowd, but supported, if you like, by a passive majority, people who couldn't or didn't speak up and challenge that type of behaviour. But when that was challenged from the 1990s onward, it was actually by fans rather than by clubs, and certainly by institutions. So the Football Supporters Association were pivotal in fan-based initiatives to challenge prejudice, discrimination, and racism. And eventually football clubs started to catch up and put diversity programs and statements challenging discrimination. And even later, the Football Association, belatedly and some may say grudgingly, took formal action until eventually we saw initiatives like Kick It Out and Stamp Out Racism in Football. And it's a very different environment today. But of course, we see that racism has not gone away in football or anywhere else, and Black footballers are still getting racist abuse now, usually by the mechanism of social media abuse. So you don't, or very rarely in this country, would now hear racist abuse on the terraces, but we see footballers being taunted with horrendous racial abuse online. As I said, I went to Islington. I took my football allegiance with me. I went, though, via Leeds University, where I did a politics degree. And there I found myself as an away fan. So I was attending in the late 80s football matches as a spectator and supporter in Yorkshire, where away fans were segregated at the end of football matches. That's how it was done in those days. You stood on the terraces, you were kept behind afterwards, you weren't allowed to leave. And if the opposing fans didn't give you a kicking, the police might. And sometimes you would be shepherded onto a bus and put on the bus back to Plymouth. So when I said, well, actually, I don't want to go back to Plymouth, I'm from Leeds University, I just want to go back to Leeds, please. The police were extremely hostile and aggressive because they looked on football supporters as scum and as hooligans, some of whom, of course, were, but that we were all bracketed in that way. And that was a very small window to me of police stereotyping. Of course, the difference for me was that as a football spectator, I could choose not to go to a football match and therefore not experience that discrimination and hostility. Whereas if that discrimination and hostility is based on your skin colour, you don't have that option of opting out. So graduated, became a lawyer, went to London and got involved in protest work. So I do human rights and criminal defence work, very heavily involved in protest, and have supported all sorts of protests up to and including Black Lives Matter. So I've done other talks to the Green Party on the right to protest, freedom of expression, on protest rights, what to do if you're on a protest and you get police harassment. And that's a topic I'm happy to answer questions on. But I'm speaking today about Jack Leslie, who I still haven't mentioned. And why is that? Because in this long life I've led of protest, study, work, and criminal law, I had never heard of Jack Leslie, and I found out about him last year. Jack Leslie was a Plymouth Argyle footballer in the 1920s, and he should have been the first black footballer to play for England. He was born in Canning Town, London. He moved he played initially for Barking, and then went to Plymouth Argyle in 1921, so the centenary next year. He scored 137 goals in 401 matches, for those of you who are interested in football stats. He toured with Plymouth Argyle South America and beat Argentina and Uruguay. They knocked Manchester United out of the cup. He was a prolific and phenomenal footballer in an era where footballers could play for England from any league. The gulf between the top division, the first, second and third, there were only three, was very small, not like the Premier League and other leagues today. And it wasn't uncommon for footballers to be called up from a lower division. And Jack Leslie was called up. So he was the first black footballer to be selected for England. But when the selection committee at the FA found out that he was black, his name was mysteriously removed from the team sheet. And it was another 50 years before a black footballer got to play for England, Viv Anderson in the 1970s. But if that's not horrendous enough and wrong, I wondered why myself, as a Plymouth Argyle fan and someone who considers myself to be anti-racist, didn't even know that story. It's almost as if that story had been airbrushed from football and social and political history. So my friend and myself decided to just do a project to raise awareness of Jack Leslie, and that's where the Jack Leslie campaign started. And then we thought we'd raise money and build a statue. And we started that in January of this year. We were plodding along, built a website, had a Twitter campaign, we're doing talks about Jack Leslie. And actually the story really resonated. We found we could use it to challenge prejudice and discrimination, particularly in schools, because in things like Black History Month, which shouldn't be a month anyway, it should be embedded in the history curriculum. The story of a footballer not picked because of the colour of his skin is one that really resonates, particularly we found for young boys. So we started doing education and putting the story out. And then we decided to fundraise for a statue. And then, as you know, this year, the Black Lives Matter protests really increased after George Floyd's murder in America. And Black Lives Matter became a topical issue again. And then, of course, statues started coming down, and including famously the Colston statue in Bristol, and good riddance to that one. And I thought, wow, suddenly this is a movement that of its time, because here are statues of slave traders are coming down. Here's an opportunity to put a statue of a black figure up. And there are not enough statues of black people represented in the United Kingdom. There aren't enough in London. There are none in the southwest, west of a small bust of Floella Benjamin in Exeter University. There are none in Plymouth. In fact, there are none in Devon or Cornwall. So, so we became proud of our campaign, and the timing really resonated. So we have a crowdfunder campaign because it's a crowdfunded campaign. We don't have any formal backing, but we have in 3 weeks raised over £70,000 towards a £100,000 target. And that's small donations. And if, as I hope you all do at the end of the talk tonight, you have a look at the crowdfunder page and possibly contribute a small amount, I urge you to look at the comments from the 1,500 people who have contributed. And you'll realise if you divide the amount I've mentioned by 1,500, that a lot of those are very small amounts. They are children putting pocket money in, they are people on benefit and low wages or unwaged or on furlough putting in £5 and £10. We have 1 or 2 larger backers and 1 commercial donation, which is welcome. I'd like to have more. I think this shows the strength of feeling. We have donations from football fans, from Plymouth Argyle, and from rival teams, and people who aren't interested in football whatsoever, but like the story. And I have built good links with the Green Party, of which I'm a supporter, and we have some cross-party support, but I know that no party will resonate better with issues of freedom, fairness and justice than the Green Party. So I'm proud to have support from some high-profile Green parties, including Caroline Lucas, who is a supporter. So, so I'll circulate the link to the crowdfunder on the forum later. Happy to answer any questions either now or after all the speakers have finished. I'll be guided by you on that, Jenny. But it's been a really positive campaign. It's created a lot of positivity at a time when we know we live in difficult and challenging times, and even saying something about Black Lives Matter can create a backlash. And I've, you know, being on the Black Lives Matter protests, I was there as a legal observer at all of the protests in London. I intervened when people were arrested. I've seen the backlash. So even as a person not of colour myself, I've experienced it. But this is something we can step out of that cesspool of anti-Black prejudice and racism and celebrate a positive campaign. And finally, I'll share with you, as I know we've mentioned Bristol, I think it was 10 years ago, possibly this month, that I represented with a criminal lawyer, Shirley Brown, who was a Black councillor in Bristol, who in a politically motivated case was prosecuted for allegedly racially aggravated offensive behaviour after she was a Lib Dem councillor at that time, and during a debate she called a Conservative opponent who was Asian a coconut, and the reason she used that racial epithet was because, and this will resonate from what we heard from my previous speaker, you won't be surprised to know the then Conservative Council were introducing a series of cuts to the diversity budget. So I'm disappointed to hear, but not surprised to hear, that they're now trying to close another centre of cultural diversity. They had a whole load of budget cuts that were going to affect Black and ethnic community groups. And then they put forward their one councillor that they had of a diverse background to speak to the motion. And as you can imagine, it outraged and upset Councillor Shirley Brown, who choked with anger and fury and almost in tears. It made an ill-judged comment calling her a coconut, which, as I'm sure you know, is referring to her being Black on the outside but white on the inside. It was an ill-judged remark. She was quite properly censured by the council for it. But then months later, the Conservatives, in a politically motivated prosecution, did a criminal prosecution on that. And and it was an outrage. So none of these battles are new. Well, I'm afraid we seem to be destined to fight them over and over again. But as I said, Jack Leslie is what I was here to speak about. That's something positive, I hope, that we can all celebrate. And thank you, Jenny, for letting me have this opportunity to talk about Jack Leslie, and thank you everyone for listening.
No problem, Greg. A really fascinating story, not just Jack Leslie's, but your own as well. I mean, he's beat you to it already. Our press officer is always putting the links in the box there, so you can see the crowdfunder. Everybody, if you can spare any amount, would be great to donate. And like you say, get more people of colour in amazing statues and around the country, not just in the southwest but all over. I can see also there's a Topple the Racists, which I think looks at statues of slave traders and you know, people who have who shouldn't be in statues. So have a look at all the links, and thank you again for your presentation, really interesting. So let's move on to our next speaker. If you're still with us, Sabrina, we've got Sabrina Pace-Humphreys here, who is a public speaker and ultra runner, personal trainer and run coach, and a local lady in Stroud, I believe. Sabrina,
Yeah.
if you can unmute yourself, and your 10 minutes can start now. Thanks.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me along. Yeah, I mean, it's when asked to kind of describe myself, I always find it very difficult because I wear so many hats. I'm a mother of 4 and grandmother of 2 as well. And I think being a grandmother and being a mother of 4, I moved to Stroud when I was 2 years old, and I'm 42 now. And from as long as I can remember, I've been the target of racism. And I kind of came to the fore, I guess, a couple of months ago, at the beginning of June, when we had some Black Lives Matter protests in Stroud. I think we were probably the only Cotswold town, which I don't think has been promoted enough really, that had 3 back-to-back Black Lives Matter protests. Everyone more busy than the last, more attended and supported than the last.
I'm so sorry, Sabrina. We're just having a little problem hearing you. If you could just put the laptop a little bit closer to you, I think that would.
Should I can put on my thing.
Oh, that's much better. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Oh, there. Let me just plug myself in, because this might just make it a little bit easier to hear me. Is that better?
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
And sorry for interrupting you.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. I think what I was saying is I came to the fore a little bit when I spoke. I was impassioned to speak at the first Black Lives Matter protest that we had in Stroud. And the reason for speaking at that, for 42 years, I've been very, I guess, silent about the racism that I have suffered in the time that I have lived in this small Cotswold market town. Really because it was very traumatic, being subject to racist verbal abuse, physical abuse, which made my life a living hell for many, many years. It's very difficult for Black and brown people to talk about their experiences, because we experience these things in different ways. Racism isn't just the verbal abuse, it isn't just the physical abuse, it isn't just the microaggressions, it isn't just the institutional racism, it's the whole gambit. But I was impassioned to speak at the BLM Stroud event because the conversation was being taken over, and I couldn't allow for that to happen in the town where I live, where I bring up my children, where my grandchildren live. And I talked about how I had suffered racism in my town. I talked about how all lives couldn't matter until Black lives mattered. And that's not to say, and I think this is something that I want to make really, really, really clear. When Black and brown people say all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. All we are asking is for equality and equity. We are not saying that we deserve more than the white person gets. We just are looking for a level playing field. And it's not a level playing field. And I said, I made a speech and it was videoed and it went viral, and I still am absolutely flabbergasted about the amount of views that that video has got. And I received a lot of support for that, but I also received a lot of hate for that, because it made people feel really uncomfortable. It made people question the town in which they live, this market town, which is very, very often put down as one of the top 5 places to live in the UK because of its inclusivity, because of its bohemian nature, because of its farmers market, etc. And making people feel uncomfortable about the area that in which they live can bring all sorts of comments to the fore. So I have had to deal with a lot of hate, as I've said, a lot of people who want to deny me of my experience, to deny me of the to be honest with you, the torture that I endured for many, many years. And I absolutely believe that these uncomfortable conversations have to happen. We all feel uncomfortable, whether you are Black, whether you are white. For me, as a mixed race person who from a very, very young age in Stroud was racialized as Black and therefore racially abused due to the color of my skin, I every day felt uncomfortable, every single day. So therefore, when we are talking about issues such as equality, equity, engendered institutional racism, when we're talking about racist tropes that are used and allowed to be used, it's an uncomfortable conversation. But it's one that has to be had, because without having those conversations, there can be no change. You know, I believe that it's really important to be anti-racist, as has been said before. It's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist. And racism, it thrives when people are uncomfortable having those conversations that make them question that which they have always believed to be true. And my work in the activism is to hold to account those people in positions of power to elicit change. I believe that especially institutional racism is about anti-Black policy. I believe that we need to not just be invited to the table, but we need to own the table when it comes to changes within our councils, within businesses, within organizations that wholeheartedly put their hands up and say, we don't understand enough about this issue and we need guidance and education. Myself and other Black and brown people over the past 2 months have been contacted via every mean in terms of mostly businesses who want to get it right, who are looking to us for guidance, but not really understanding that they need to do some of the work themselves as well. There's so much information out there that you need to look to educate, look to what is already out there, and then come and talk to us about the issues that we deal with every day as Black and brown people, because we are too still going through trauma. trauma that's been kind of brought back up in us through, the death of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter protests, stuff that we're having to deal with every day. So for me at the moment in my activism, it is to work with other people of colour in Stroud, with an activism group that has been set up called Stroud Against Racism, that currently I think is 2,500 people within that community, in order to make change, in order to not just have a seat at the table, but to be absolutely instrumental in helping to make decisions which affect us as a community. But also it was really interesting to hear from Greg, because my passion is trail running. So I'm an ultra runner. I run very, very long distances. And I love trail running because we live in the Cotswolds and I have commons on my doorsteps, etc. Now, I use my running as a way to manage my mental health, first and foremost, as a way to deal with the racism that I have endured in my life. I take myself to the trails, especially in these past few months, in order to find peace and in order to work through that which myself and friends and family are going through. And I only found out last week that I'm a mountain runner as well, that a man called Charlie Ramsey, who was the first man to ever complete a mountain round to bag 26 Scottish Munros, which are Scottish mountains above 3,000 feet. In 1978, let me just get this right, because it was the year I was born, Charlie Ramsey, a black man, completed those 26 rounds in under 24 hours. Now, I've been running for my youngest daughter's 11, so 11 years. And it's only last week I've heard about the Charlie Ramsey round. It was on my bucket list of things to do. It was only last week that someone said, of course, Charlie was a black man. And I was absolutely stunned. Because again, from a representation point of view, especially within trail running, the countryside, the diversity in the countryside is something that I'm working on as well, to encourage more people of colour to take up hiking, trail running, mountain climbing. We are not represented out there. We do not see people like us out there. I see this day in, day out. Often I am the only person of colour that I see on the trails, on the Cotswold Way, etc., etc. And it's more than just, well, people must not like it, people of colour. It's about access, it's about skills, and it's about representation. And my mission is, from a local perspective, is to absolutely ask uncomfortable questions of those people in power who hold the budgets and make the decisions, read policy in terms of our lives mattering, Black lives mattering in the Stroud district. And number two, when it comes to the outdoor space and diversity in the outdoor space, we are launching next week a Black Trail Runners campaigning and community group in order to address some of those issues that prevent people of colour from experiencing the outdoors. So I don't want to go on too much about that, because I haven't got, because 10 minutes is past, but those are the things that really at the moment I'm working on and I'm very, very passionate about.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Really interesting to hear your story. I think you're right. As a nation, as a people, we have to face the hard truths that are there for everybody to see. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to look beyond the hashtag. This isn't just a social media movement. This is a movement that needs action in every level of government, at the council level, in our households, starting at our dinner tables, all of those kinds of things. So really interesting presentation, and thank you for sharing with us. Again, we will, I think we've got Oh, one question from Sally. Have you ever thought about running for election?
You know what, Sally, I absolutely hadn't. This is all very, very new to me. As I say, I really kind of only came to the fore with the with the BLM protests. The more I learn, every day is a learning experience for me. That the politics is something that I find that can happen between parties is something that is quite frustrating for someone like me, because what I said to a friend the other day is I saw a comment which was about the BLM being politicized, and my response to that is, this is our lives. This isn't, you can call it a political hot potato or whatever you want, but no, this is our lives, and we will not be reduced to a political ball game. It's too important for that. Our lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren and the community at large is too important for that. So I hadn't thought of it, but the more that I see things that just absolutely need to change, the more I think, is there a part I could play in that?
Amazing, great to hear. And I hope Osei and Greg, you would also think about those things as well. So, okay, moving on to our final speaker, and I will address some of the other questions that are coming in after, and we can have a proper Q&A. So Miriam is a midwifery student, and again is local to the Stroud area. I think it's from Gloucestershire, is it? But in doing midwifery in Stroud. Miriam, are you there?
Oh yeah,
right.
sorry.
No, come on.
Yeah, hi, I actually live in Stroud, but my midwifery degree is in Bristol, so.
Oh right, it's the way around,
so,
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So I commute there, but not at the moment, obviously. So just a few bits about myself, and then I'll go on to talk about what we're sort of trying to achieve at the moment. I moved to Stroud in 1996, and it wasn't massively multicultural at the time. My secondary school had like over 600 kids in it, and I think there was like 3 or 4 of us maybe that were black or mixed race. So yeah, there are now many more BAME faces around Stroud, but we're obviously still in a small minority. So I have 2 young children at primary school that are mixed race, and the primary school is predominantly white. And after the recent BLM movements began, I asked my oldest child, like, what have you learned from school about different cultures? And I was really interested, because although we constantly have conversations at home, obviously, about all sorts of different religions and cultures and everything, it's just a normal thing. I suddenly thought, oh, I hadn't actually really thought about what they do at school. So yeah, and so she said, oh, obviously, apart from, she didn't call it the token day, but I call it as a token day, things like Diwali, drawing fireworks, or I mean, I'm thinking of key stage 1 age, so sort of below the age of sort of 7, is it? Anyway, but things like Chinese New Year, making spring rolls, colouring dragons in, or yeah, and then obviously in key stage 2, things like comprehension, they'd be like Diwali comprehension, so they'd read a passage, answer questions, but again, it's sort of not really embedded in just the general sort of curriculum. It felt like it was always very sort of little short things that they did that wasn't sort of continued all the way through. So I sort of thought, well, what can we do that could obviously change that? What can we do as parents, at this school? And we were thinking about how, like, even the children have a Victorian Day, for instance, and they dress up as, in old-fashioned clothes, and there's no mention of Victorian Britain and the huge empire worldwide that they had. So it's sort of those uncomfortable conversations. They're happy to do these sorts of little bits, but not have these kind of conversations that can be uncomfortable. And I suppose in primary schools, it's about how you would balance those conversations out, obviously, for young children. So a group of parents, actually, we've gotten together, and we've had some Zoom meetings about what we'd actually like to obviously talk to the school about and approach them. And we've been having discussions back and forth with the head of the PSHE at our local school, and she's actually been really forthcoming. The heads behind it all as well. They've been we've shared books with them as to what they could buy, maybe, which are written not only by BAME authors, but also where there are people of colour in the books, different religions, different cultures, different family types as a norm, so that our children can actually see themselves in these books, without it being a stereotypical like black person in a book that you would perhaps have in a school, you know, which isn't the case obviously for a lot of children. You know, to see that in a book, it would be a bit like, well, that's not me, you know. So it's really important to show books that are just general lives of people, so and all different sorts of people. So yeah. And so they're also going to make sure that their sort of displays are more inclusive, and also in their work that the children are going to be doing. So that's really important, obviously. We've also discussed with the school about twinning with maybe a city school, so that there'd be like a more of a wider community feel. Gloucester's 10 miles away, for instance, and the diversity there is vast in comparison to Stroud. And so sort of for me personally, I would think that that would be a really good place maybe to start, because obviously the differences living in a city, so what we were thinking were that they could do sort of rather than sort of general conversations, it would be like, yeah, because we're a rural school, like what's the difference with living in a city, and what's the differences, but obviously knowing that actually when they come together they realize they're into the same sports, or they're into the same, you know, subjects. So it's about sort of bringing their lives closer together, and sorry, I'm just checking my notes, I don't want to miss anything. And obviously it can be an ongoing project that isn't just a one-off, and if the school is close by, like Gloucester for instance, then it allows children to visit each other as well, so it can be just occasion throughout the years, which I think is really important. And then we've kind of left it now because obviously it's the summer holidays, but each curriculum lead at the school are going to look at their documents, and then when the children are back at school we're going to have a meeting, and I'll be having the meeting with the global learning history and geography lead, who's currently updating the strands of the curriculum and purchasing a new scheme of work, which they'd like to share with us in the view of perhaps extending it or enhancing it. So that's really positive. And I've also contacted another school in our local area who completely join with the school that my kids go to in the meeting, so that they can hopefully do similar things, so that that can be kind of continuing throughout, you know, throughout a few of the schools, and in the hope that maybe other schools will pick it up in the future, so like in Stroud, so that, you know, so they can all sort of, we can hopefully sorry, I'm getting all in a muddle. Yeah, so anyway, we're just wanting that Stroud children can grow up to be more knowledgeable about the world around them and be more inclusive. So yeah, what I've described so far is about broadening children's views on the world, but it's important that they can look at their own prejudice about other people. So yeah, and obviously, like I said, I realise at primary school age that could be quite tricky having those conversations, but I was also talking to the teacher about how we need to sort of get the parents backing in all of this, because actually the children can come home and have these open conversations and feel like it's an okay thing to discuss without it being like, you know, this sort of tiptoeing and not necessarily feeling comfortable. So it's about using the right language. And yeah, I'm really hoping that we can get all the parents involved as well at the school, and hopefully that'll just in general spread around Stroud better. So that's what I've been doing after everything. So yeah.
Amazing, Miriam. That is really honestly inspirational. I think it's amazing that you've had such a great reaction from the school, and that they're happy to work with you and the other parents to, you know, get this into the curriculum in a meaningful way rather than in a tokenistic way, like you say. It might be taught sometimes, but I think that Stroud district councillors would be very interested to hear more about that, and how they can support you with that school agenda, and getting it spread across I mean, we've got a comment there from Robin saying about the twinning idea, just really interesting and fantastic idea, especially even just the differences between living in a city and being in a city school compared to some of the schools in more rural areas will be a big conversation for children. But yeah, definitely such an important first step to take, and I'm sure, like you say, schools in Gloucester will really appreciate that as well. I mean, 4 amazing speakers, all very different, a lot of similar lines running through there. I think it is about beyond the hashtag action-based politics, action-based policy that we need to be looking at now. They can't just be conversations or protests anymore. After the protest needs to come action needs to come change. And I think that that is what all our 4 speakers have been speaking about. And I think that it's really inspirational, and thank you so much all for sharing with us. So I know that on our Action Network, where our invites come from, we had lists. If you are on the call and have and want to unmute yourself, there was, I know that the Colston statue issue is obviously something that everybody's aware of, and I think that Liz mentioned something within Stroud that is of similar. Liz, are you there? If you want me to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it. But I mean, we'd love to get you on the call to, if you can unmute yourself. Liz, I think.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I wasn't talking about that statue. What happened was, I think that when I registered, it said you're invited to make a comment. So I made a comment, but the comment I made was that a friend of mine who's moved to Stroud from Bristol, who is mixed race, woman of colour, she made a comment about living in this area, that it was a very beautiful place, but there was a lot of unconscious bias. And listening to Sabrina, you know, what she experienced, I think that, you know, for my friend also, you know, the change from Bristol to here has not been easy in that sense. But I think because I made that comment, it seemed like every other comment had my name on it. So it looks like I also made lots of other comments, which I didn't. I just made that one comment. But I think what you're referring to is the Black Boy statue at the top of town.
That is
which
right.
Quite a few people said they thought needed to be, you know, looked at, discussed, talked to the owner, see if it could be moved, maybe go in a museum. So there were a lot of people who made comments around that, I noticed when I read the thing. So, you know, that wasn't my bag, but
okay, no worries. Thanks, Liz, for saying that. I think maybe we should broach your comment anyway, and we'll put it to the 4 speakers. So unconscious bias. I think if everybody would like to come in on that, I will invite you one by one just to have a conversation, because thanks, Liz, that is a very important part. And then after that, maybe we can move on. I've just been shown that it was actually a lady called Jane who's made the comment about the Black Boy statue. So we will come to that afterwards. Let's go with Osei first. Would you like to come in on unconscious bias, and if you've got any comments on that?
Yeah, unconscious bias is a really difficult thing, because it's very hard to pin down and actually trace. So I saw a program recently, which was The School That Tried to End Racism. If anybody's seen it, it's on Channel 4 or All 4 to catch up on, which is super interesting. And I think for me, the interesting thing that came out of that was seeing, even for how many of the Black children in that school had the unconscious bias towards white people. And it really does. One of the worst things about it is everyone just assumes that Britain isn't racist. And I think the unconscious bias sort of shows everybody that the socialization, the education, the jokes, the TV shows, the music, like every single thing in Britain sort of leads you to have this bias towards white people. I've had many conversations with other Black and mixed race people who have said they find it easier to identify with like a white person just because that's all they ever see in magazines, on TV, like being models or like being called beautiful. And the inability to connect with that based on how they look it is really widespread. And I think for lots of people, like Sabrina was saying, it is just really traumatic and it's so hard to talk about. I myself have had loads of people message me in the recent months because they've seen lots of stuff, and they're like, yeah, like I support the work you're doing, but it's just too much for me to be doing that myself. So yeah, like there is lots of support from people who have these feelings. They're just too traumatized to talk about it. And I think one of the main things that I think we need to be doing is setting up support groups to have these discussions for people to get over this trauma. Is not something that we are just going to have one or two protests about and then it's going to disappear. It's a lengthy process of like deconstructing it from our minds and from our lives.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, Greg, would you like to make a comment on unconscious bias?
Yeah, I'll try and do a screen share if I can. Let's see if I can bring something up. I'm going to talk just very briefly about unconscious bias, but also about hidden conscious bias, if that makes sense, because I'm going to just reference it to criminal justice bias. So, right, has that come up as a screenshot?
Yeah, that's come up.
Yeah, so this is some of the stats for bias that we see in the Black community, but I'm particularly interested in my line of work in those that affect criminal justice. So it starts with stop and search and suspicion, then more likely, of course, to be targeted with a different skin colour, then more likely to be arrested if it's a minor offence. If arrested, more likely to be charged and cautioned than a white person in an equivalent situation. If charged, more likely to be convicted, and when convicted, more likely to receive a higher sentence. So I did some work with David Lammy when he did the Lammy report into bias in the criminal justice system, and I've always, tried to challenge discrimination. But I think there's two aspects. One is unconscious bias, because I look at the judiciary and magistrates, and I think, how is it that Black people or people from different diverse backgrounds are getting higher sentences? Because I don't think that most of the magistrates I appear before are overtly racist or aware of racism, but the statistics don't lie. So why is it that people of colour are more likely to be convicted or more likely to receive a higher sentence? And if it's not overt and conscious, then it must be unconscious bias. And that's something that therefore should be dealt with in training and education and awareness, and can be rooted out. Slightly different issue for juries, but you notice in jury decisions in London, where you have a diverse jury, there isn't a noticeable difference in conviction depending on the colour of the defendant. But whatever the Crown Court local to Stroud is, may be different. I don't know. Or do people go to Bristol Crown Court from Stroud? Big cities, basically, with representative juries, are less likely to have those type of issues. But the other issue is conscious but hidden discrimination, because what's happened is that police officers, prison officers, and people in the justice system have learned to hide their bias, and that doesn't mean that that's not unconscious bias. Okay, they know perfectly well that the decision making they are doing is based on prejudice and discrimination, but they've learned that it's wrong to say that overtly. They've learned that somebody might be filming it on a phone, or it might be caught on their own body-worn camera. So they are doing avoidance techniques. So they won't necessarily use overtly racist terms that might be recorded, but that doesn't stop people from taking those stop and search decisions, those arrest decisions, and exercising discrimination in the way that they challenge and approach members of the public. And I see this because I know there's a lot of connections with Stroud here. There's a big connection with Extinction Rebellion. A lot of the XR guys came from Stroud, and I did a lot of protest work with XR. And multiple arrests on those protests, but a very predominantly white protest movement, XR. And I can tell you, from my own experience, the way police control and police crowds are very different when it's a white middle class protest than it is when it's a young black but peaceful protest like the Black Lives Matter. Never mind the tail end of some of those protests where it got a bit feisty. I'm talking about the early bits where it was peaceful, where it was predominantly young and black, and a different police reaction, but maybe not expressed in overtly racist terms. So that's also a difficult topic that I think those of us in the criminal justice system have to continue to find ways to root out and challenge. I'm good at identifying the problem, but I've been doing it for 25 years. I still haven't found a way of solving it. We just have to keep talking about it and raising it and bringing the challenge, I think.
Absolutely, thanks, Greg. Sabrina, would you like to come in on give a comment on unconscious bias? Thanks.
I think this is absolutely critical in terms of education and training, especially for those people in power who, again, are in charge of policy making at local, regional, and national level. Because when you are white and you take your first breath, there is privilege, there is white privilege, and whether you understand exactly what white privilege means, it's not saying that you haven't had a hard life too, that you haven't had to survive on low income too, that you haven't been in substandard housing too. It's saying that that hasn't happened to you because of the colour of your skin. And I think certainly from my point of view, in my dealings that I've had with local authority, etc., the unconscious and conscious bias that I have been party to, and I have seen, and many black and brown people have seen, and many white allies have seen and have taken action against that. It's so apparent that it's there, but it is almost being swept under the carpet as if, well, no, that's not what these decisions are based on. And it's absolutely crystal clear for those of us that understand what unconscious and conscious bias is, that decisions have been taken and are being taken and will continue to be taken unless there is the proper training, not a tick box exercise training, not online, complete this, proper training by the proper organizations in order to really help people to understand where their unconscious bias lies. For me, in my life, I've experienced it in the last couple of months in terms of trying to hold people to account and seeing how unconscious or conscious bias has stopped that process or has tried to stop that process in its tracks. But also, as a mixed race person, as a child, when you are not given the same opportunities, for example, at Christmas plays, at end of year concerts, opportunities to represent your school because of the colour of your skin and the decisions taken by those people in power or in charge because of the colour of your skin, that they're not even aware that they're doing, that's a massive problem and something which absolutely must be addressed.
Absolutely. We're getting a lot of agreement in the chat function with what you're saying there, Sabrina. Miriam, on the unconscious bias, if you'd like to give a comment, thanks.
Yeah, this is sort of having a think about it whilst everybody else was talking. So I don't know if you know this, but black women are 5 times more likely to die during childbirth in this country. It's a lot worse in America, which is awful, just absolutely dreadful. And that is, we're looking at it now. There's a really big emphasis on it actually, because they're so, obviously we're all really concerned about it, and we obviously want to completely wipe that out so it's not the case. And that is the unconscious bias in people. That is you know, does that take you all the way back to, oh, black people don't feel pain, so we're not going to listen to them so clearly, we're not going to, you know, we're not going to take them seriously if they're saying that something's wrong, or, you know, and it's sort of that unconscious bias, you know, even in hospitals and for our doctors and our nurses who are caring for us. I mean, that's worrying. We really need to sort of, yeah, really look into it and really think about what our unconscious bias is and how we can address that. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about during that, you know.
Absolutely. I think it is often talked about, you know, in the police, in the courts, in those kinds of areas, but you're right, in our hospitals as well. It's not just in those places that it is most evident. It's across, you know, across all organisations, systemic racism can exist. I'd like to bring in Martin Whiteside, who is a district councillor, just to speak briefly about the statute that was previously mentioned, because I think the council are keen to engage with people and consult on this issue. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, everybody, and wonderful speakers. Thank you so much. Just Jane Hoskin raised this and raised it in the chat in advance of it, but she doesn't seem to be on the call. This is this clock and a house called the Black Boys House, but it's a Black Boys clock that's part of a listed building that's in private ownership at the top of town, just by Castle Street up off Nelson Street, and you know. There are a number of people, but Jane has particularly been pointing out the image of the boy as a slave boy who's up there. It's very stereotyped, and the question is, what should we do about it as a community and as a town and district council? So just to say, you know, the district council wants to hear what the community feels should be done. We have I'm a district councillor. We have contacted the house owner. I mean, the clock is from the 1780s, I think. It's as I say, it's a listed building. It's a listed structure. But we're also are planning some sort of community consultation around that. But it'd be really good to hear people's views here. I mean, the suggestions have been to link it into a broader educational. Is Jane there?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's fine. It's because you're talking about it.
Yeah. No, please come in on that. You know, the suggestions that have been around broader education, or to move it. But Jane, do you want to take over from here?
I can do. I think it can sound a bit trivial, just worrying about a statue. I suppose there's a bit of history to it. My daughter Rosie, her father's from Sudan, and she was brought up in Stroud and went to school in Stroud and Cirencester and suffered a lot of racism. I actually went to college in the Black Boys School, and I did an access course when it was part of Stroud College, and I was always thought this is really odd having this thing here, but did nothing about it. There didn't seem to be, I didn't know what to do. Anyway, because of the whole recent Black Lives Matter and the statues, it just was glaringly obvious that this statue should not be there. It's really offensive. And but as a positive, because I think education, I agree with Miriam that education, well, everybody I'm sure thinks education is one of the main areas that we can change consciousness and bias and prejudice in this country. And I think to have it in the Stroud Museum for local people and children to understand what has happened in this country as regards racism and imperialism and post-imperialism, I just think it would be, I don't know, I just feel it needs to go. And I understand we need public opinion, but at the same time, for me, it's an offensive artifact to have in the middle of Stroud. And that's just my thoughts. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks for coming in on that. Apologies that there's a few Janes on here, so apologies that we didn't.
It's fine. Thank you for listening.
No problem, and thank you for raising it. I don't know who wants to come in first, if the speakers want to raise their hand, if they'd like to come in on that. Okay, let's go with Osei first, and then we will go to Miriam. Thanks, Osei.
Okay, just because I was there when Colston was brought down, I felt like it would be great for me to jump in. But at the same time, because I have quite a strong view on this myself, and I think when we take statues like Colston and compare them with like figures like the Black Boy, we have to take into account what was going through the people's minds at the time, and we have to look at it in a historical context. And I think when you look at it in a historical context, the idea of like putting Colston in a statue that was like huge and was like really flattering to his appearance and what he did for the city and the country as a whole, it was really just like venerating him and almost worshipping him. But in comparison to the statue of the Black Boy, it is literally a caricature that had always been pushed since the beginning of slavery. And I think one of my best things that I've read is Black and British, a book by David Olusoga, and that it literally goes so in depth into the history of Black people in Britain and talks about how there has been a population of Black people living in Britain since Roman times, but it's just been very small. And it wasn't until about the 1500s that it started to sort of explode. And there has been lots of like historical conflicts within that, but the idea of Black wasn't used prior to slavery. There were terms like Moor or Ethiopian or like Cushite or whatever it was. They were synonymous with Black, but they weren't Black itself, because the word Black was specifically reserved for being like a negative term in religious usage, because half of the continent was Christian at the time. So you have to put things into context. And I think it's not necessarily that it was intentional, but the things that have happened because of that have has been perpetuated for the last 500 years. And within that is just this negative caricature of Black people and how they are simple or stupid. They don't contribute to society much, or if they do, it's in a negative way. And that has been directly transposed from the idea of the Black Devil, which comes straight from slavery. So we need to, when we are addressing these things, we do need to look more deeply at the history, and it is an education thing. And we do need to be addressing that in the education in schools, especially schools that are named after people like Edward Colston or Black Boy School.
Thank you. Very interesting about, you know, the historical context of that. A really interesting response. Thank you. Miriam, you had your hand up as well. Do you want to come in on that? Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, strangely, they've turned into flats now, like Jane said. But so I actually used to live in the flat at Black Boy School, and I saw the statue. But to me personally, that sort of didn't resonate with me. I just thought, well, it's just a statue. I don't personally look at that and get offended, because I know who I am, and I know that I have friends and family that love me for me. And although I have had racism, and although that continues, I sort of feel like that doesn't say anything to me, that statue in Stroud. So personally, I feel there are many more things we need to be doing than taking a statue down that I can walk past without even seeing it, you know? We're not talking about Colston, you know, his statue was obviously massive and really sort of, yeah, there, isn't it? Really in the centre of Bristol. So you walk past him all the time, sort of thing. But I think the little statue in Stroud, although I know that people want it taken down, and I'm sure it should be taken down at some point. But personally, I just think there's so many more things that we need to really be concentrating on than just the removal of a little statue. That's how I feel about that one.
Thanks for your views. Sabrina, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think, you know, I absolutely, you know, I was so disappointed that I wasn't there for Colston. I'd gone to 3 Stroud protests, and I was going to the Cheltenham protest on the Monday. So I just had friends who were at Bristol, and when I saw Colston brought down, I was just like, oh my God, this is just it's a historic moment, and I wished I would have been there. But I have to agree, so in Stroud, I think I have to agree with Miriam. I have been in conversations about the Black Boy statue. For me, there are bigger issues that need to be addressed within our town, within our immediate localism, and action that needs to be taken there. And I think that certainly myself, Miriam, other people of colour, we believe that our energy is better placed isn't the right word, but certainly you have to, you know, you have to be very mindful of where your energy goes when dealing with everything else, being a parent, being a Black person, and dealing with everything that's going on. And I think, you know, I agree with Miriam. There are other issues that we believe are more prominent in terms of needing to be addressed in the short term, than the removal of the Black Boy statue. I am really, really glad that it's going to public consultation. I think, or a consultation. I think that's really, really important to do that, to bring the community in. My view on statues are that I learned more. I mean, I already knew about Edward Colston, but I've learned more about other statues that have been brought down by the act of them being brought down than by walking past them in London or in America, etc. So therefore, I believe there's more education to be had in a museum context where I take my children, I take my grandchildren, I take myself to learn, than there is a massive statue that you would walk past and not really learn too much from, other than that's not a great statue or a great person.
Okay, really interesting to get all these different views. Greg, did you want to come in quickly on that?
I don't know the statue, so I'm not going to express a comment on that one. But as I said earlier, I certainly thought it was a joyous moment when the Colston statue came down for so many reasons. The act of taking a statue down is a political act. It is a statement, and for every action there is a reaction. And obviously there's been a whole debate about that, and it's put the council in the decision of what to do with the statue. Does it go back up? What do they do with the statue that took its place, which was by sculptor Quinn recently, which was rather beautiful, and went up for a short period. You know, I always think it's good opportunities to channel positivity and look at ways to celebrate diversity, to challenge racist stereotropes. But you know, and don't be afraid of taking those debates, you know, to the streets. But sometimes messaging, you know, gets can get distracted by the reaction. So it's you know, very, very good to think through thoughtfully about how to create and maintain a positivity, because we've seen that with Black Lives Matter. First, there was sort of incomprehension at what it was about. Then there was a period of understanding. Then there was a period of tolerance, and then inevitably there's, you know, a period of backlash, and that goes back to the sort of disguised racism, like you know, the All Lives Matter, you know, reaction, which is frankly quite easily dealt with, but then also, you know, it can drag you into some dark places, and you have to take the challenge there. But on the particular statue, that topic of this question, I'm not qualified to say, as I've neither seen it nor read the history.
No problem. Thank you for your views anyway, Greg. Okay, it's 9:15, and I think I would really like to get people's sort of final comments on the issue of sort of Black Lives Matter beyond the hashtag. I know that all of you have touched on it in your presentations and also in the questions following that, but sort of a last summary point would be really great from each of you. Again, just to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us as panelists, and also to everybody who has joined us in the audience. I know that we've got loads more questions that I could pose to the panelists that are really fantastic questions, and I know that if anyone has anything specific they would like to ask any of the panelists, I'm more than happy to share that with them following the session. There's been, just to point everyone to the chat as well, loads of links have gone in there, and also loads of recommended reading. I think that's a really important part of this, is that we need to educate ourselves in order to have a proper conversation, a proper meaningful conversation. So take a look at the recommended reading list. Maybe we'll try and share it on social media following this, as well as obviously in the YouTube channel. So final thoughts: Black Lives Matter beyond the hashtag. What does it mean to you? What is your focus going forward? And what actions do we need to take as allies to this movement? Osei, would you like to go first?
I guess for me going forward, it is, like you said, about educating myself, but also spreading that education with other people and making sure that those closest to me have access to that as well. In the wider world, I would say it's about building with other African Caribbean people, but it's also about like working together with our allies to make the world a better place. It's not just like building our own thing. Like, we are trying to, like, at the end of the day, be equal in the society we live in. Like, and that's, yeah. So I would just say it's about building, development, and learning.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to Greg next. What are your thoughts on this issue? Thanks.
The Green Party is a political party. You have an electoral process, you have a constitution, you have a manifesto. Black Lives Matter isn't a political party, but people now are trying to treat it as if it is. So one of the backlash comments is, oh, Black Lives Matters, they're Marxists, a bunch of Marxists, because, you know, oh, look, some of them want to defund the police. Although that's a semantic point, and we all know that what they think is meant by defund the police is actually a very different thing anyway. But I think it's important to recognise Black Lives Matter is UK or Black Lives Matter America. It's not a political party. At the end of the day, it's a statement. It's a statement of intent. It's a statement of fact. It's a slogan, but it's more than a slogan. It's 3 words: Black Lives Matter, full stop. So I'm not going to be distracted by people trying to brush that aside by appendaging a load of opinions that may or may not be shared, because I've been on the Black Lives Matter protests, or the London ones, and I'm sure that some of the people on those protests were Marxists, some of them were conservatives, some of them have no political views whatsoever. The point is, they're not there for any reason other than to make a statement of fact and to hold that banner up and to shine a light on it and to say to the rest of society, Black Lives Matter. It's a beautiful, simple slogan. And so my advice as someone who's done a lot of protests and a lot of protest work and a little bit of politics is stick to the slogan and don't get distracted into side politic issues. Just keep the message clear. Black Lives Matter, full stop.
Thanks, Greg. Sabrina, would you like to come in on your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know, our lives matter. That's all we're fighting for. That's all that we're doing this for, that we come and we speak to people and we do our best to educate, and we put ourselves on the line day in, day out, sharing our vulnerabilities in order to educate, in order to cause that just change in thinking, in order to help you to put yourself maybe in our shoes, even for a second. And we believe that we're worth that. So absolutely, as Greg says, it's 3 words: Black Lives Matter. Our lives matter. The lives of our children and the lives of generations to come matter. This happens in the UK, and in Stroud, it happens. It happens every day. Happened to me yesterday, happened to me the day before. And please take time to listen to, I know that there's been some suggestions of books to read. I certainly, a few, Black and British, as Osei talked about, why I'm no longer talking to white people about race, how to be an anti-racist, Black and British, there are books out there that are fantastic books. There are great videos out there. Don't be afraid to feel uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable, this process is, but it's about action, people. It's about action. And stand with us, stand with us and help us to make and take action, because we need the support, because our lives matter.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sabrina. Really powerful words. Miriam, would you like to come in with your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me personally, just the idea of don't let this just be the end of it. Let's not just go, do you know what, we've done a little bit, we've read a book. I mean, just really continue. I mean, it's really tiring, I think, for it to just fall on like Black people's shoulders, BAME people's shoulders, to have to continue working on this. It's got to be a general swoop of everybody really contributing and continuing it, because I really would hate to think that we're doing this work now and for it to be in a year's time just go, oh, do you know what, we've tried it, it's not working, or or whatever, or something's happened but not enough. It needs to just be a continuation, like Sabrina said, awkward conversations, and they are awkward. They're awkward for all of us. They're awkward for me. But you need to do these conversations. You need to have them with whoever. So whether it's our children from a really young age, that's okay to do. To say that, oh, that person's Black, yes, because everybody's different colours, that's okay, and all these things, rather than being like, oh, shush, let's not have this conversation, So it's a really important thing to just, no matter what age they are, just let's have those conversations and just let's keep going.
Absolutely. I think thank you for everyone for their final thoughts on that. It was really interesting conversation, and you're right, face the hard truths, educate ourselves, join in the conversation, be an active ally, and don't let it just be for now, let it be forever, and let us revisit this conversation. And I'm sure that Stroud Greens and the Cloud Cafe are going to continue these online conversations, and I'm sure it would be good for us to revisit Black Lives Matter and see where we've got to in half a year, and see what the council are doing, and see what we as individuals are doing and have done to address this situation that we find ourselves in. So thank you so much to the speakers. Thank you so much to all our audience members. Usually at the end of these sessions, we invite everybody to put their cameras back on so that that you've been speaking to people. You can unmute yourselves if you like. Remember, this recording will be on the YouTube channel. If you'd like to share it with anybody, please do. We really want to reach as many people as we can with this conversation. It's so important to have it. And just, thank you for joining, especially Osei at such short notice. We really appreciate you stepping up. And we hope that we can stay in touch with you guys, and let us know if you've got any links or anything you would like us to share with our community, because Stroud Greens are absolutely an ally to the Black Lives Matter movement and will continue to be so. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely evening. Bye.
Thanks for amazing sharing as well, Jenny.
Thank
you. Thanks all speakers. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye, guys.